As we begin our public speaking unit, our first chapter is an introduction to public speaking and actually covers several different topic areas. So I'm going to break it up into 2 sessions. This first session is going to discuss ethics, the purpose for speaking, and audience analysis. We have the First Amendment right to free speech, and we want to be responsible with that freedom. And we want to be an appropriate and effective communicator. And so our goal is to become ethical and responsible when we speak. So this initial session will help us work on that and become more appropriate and effective. As an ethical speaker, you need to make sure that you are presenting good information to your audience so that you're not wasting the audience's time. You want to be considerate of your audience. So when you start researching, it's really important that you are keeping track of anything you might use. Make sure you note the publication and the journal or the book or the magazine and the dates, and you want to keep track of that. That's a running bibliography or kind of works cited page. So make sure you're taking accurate notes, because you don't want to accidentally present information that's not yours. That would be plagiarism. Now, plagiarism can be a direct quote without saying who or the original person is that's speaking that, or it could be paraphrasing. And we want to give credit where credit is due. And I understand we get really frustrated because we can't say it as well as they can, and that's okay. Say what they said, but just give credit where credit is due and give them the credit. You actually become a more credible speaker, more trustworthy. You become ethical because you're recognizing the author of the material, and you actually look really good. We know that you can purchase speeches just like you can purchase papers, and all we have to do is type in a few phrases from your speech, and we can find it just as easily as you can. You also won't be as confident if you're buying somebody else's speech and trying to give that as your own. So it doesn't work in your favor. So work on your accuracy of your notes and your research so that you can be ethical and responsible. You're going to gain our trust and our respect. You will be telling us in your speech where your information comes from, and so you need to track it anyway. We will talk about how to say that in your speech a little bit later on in the process. There are basically 5 steps to prepare a successful speech. You would figure out who your audience is and what the occasion or situation is. You want to develop your topic, your purpose, or your thesis. Sometimes you're asked to speak and they're telling you what they want you to speak on. You would then be gathering your materials and research. You then would be organizing your ideas, constructing main points, and your evidence or your materials become the support of your main points. We call those subpoints. And then you would want to practice your speech and make sure you can say it well, and that you practice using any visual aids so that you are prepared for the time of your presentation. When you do give a speech, there are 3 purposes for speaking. They all fall into one of these 3 categories. We have informative speeches, so our purpose is to inform our audience. Persuasive speeches are to persuade or to inspire. We could include that. And a special occasion speech we would study in the public speaking class, where we might be giving a toast or a graduation speech or having to give a eulogy at a funeral, right? Those would be special occasion speeches. So those are the 3 purposes. So there's always a reason for giving an ultimate purpose for your speech. And you would want to know, am I supposed to teach and inform, or am I convincing and persuading? So we want to check out who our audience is and who your listeners are. And so it's really important to try to learn more about your audience. Now, here we have a class that you've started meeting one another a little bit by watching the object introductions. You have a group that you're starting to connect with. You met a few people on the discussion board, and you've learned a little bit about them that way. And so we have some initial information. We are a mixed group of individuals with different co-cultures. We are all, I'm going to say, we're all young adults who are wanting to learn new things. But in other speaking situations, you need to learn more about your audience. So we need to think about the different types of audience analysis. There are three. We can look at attitudes, demographics, and the situation or the occasion. For attitudinal analysis, we're trying to evaluate the attitudes of those people who are present. Why are they there? Are they required to be there? Are they forced to be there? They might not have such an exciting, positive attitude. Are they choosing to be there? They might be more interested. So your attitude of the audience is important to try to assess of how you can adapt your material based on their attitudes. Because sometimes you're just forced to be there, and that's a negative attitude. The attitudes would be the feelings the audience has towards possibly the topic, or you as the speaker, and possibly the occasion. So you would ask yourself those questions. You also want to consider demographics. That's anything that's measurable. Age, ethnicity, cultural background, socioeconomic status, religious and political affiliations. Sometimes some of that is relevant and sometimes it's not relevant. So you could choose what you want to learn about your audience. If you were invited to speak to a group of middle school students, your presentation would be delivered differently with different information, different vocabulary than if you were speaking to a group of PhD candidates or adults or senior citizens. And so the demographics allow you to adapt your message to that specific audience. Sex and gender are also part of demographics. Different types of groups or clubs, orientations are also applicable, and possibly disabilities to consider when reaching an audience. Then we have situational audience analysis, and that's analyzing the setting or the context, all the logistics of the situation. If we were in the classroom would be our speech setting, and we would know we have a big screen and a projector and where the computer is and where the audience is. You have to adapt. What is your speech setting? Where can you set up the camera? I recommend having your audience member hold the camera, the recorder, even your computer if you have to use that, because you need to have an audience. How does that work? Can you spread people out on the sofa or the chairs? What about your lighting? All of those things will come into play for you giving your speeches. So the size of an audience would be something that you would want to know in most speech settings, what the layout is of the room or the seating arrangement. Is it a gymnasium where there's people on both sides of the gym, or are you in the front of the room up on a stage, right? The layout is important. How long are you going to speak? What is the time of day that you're speaking? If you're speaking after a lunch, I'll tell you they'll be tired, right? And so that also is important to learn and figure out. Right? Part of audience analysis, let me just go back. I can't go back with my slides. Part of audience analysis would also include equipment. Do you need a microphone? Do you have a projector? Do you need to give handouts? That also is part of audience analysis. So there's lots of different ways to research an audience. One, you can ask the person that maybe invited you to speak more about the audience. You might have to do a little bit of research yourself. You could have face-to-face communication. You could be conducting some impromptu surveys. You might have to call somebody to ask questions or email. You might be able to email an audience ahead of time. You have to sometimes get creative in trying to learn about your audience. In this class, we already know who our audience is, basically, and so you're okay right now with your knowledge of this class. So that's a little bit about purpose, ethics, and audience analysis to help get you started on the initial stages of beginning to prepare for a public presentation.